Good morning, you're very welcome to the Guaranteed Irish Tech Forum held in April every year, and delighted to have you on board. We have a large number of registrations for this morning. I think we're over the 100 now, so you're all very welcome to join and engage with us as much as possible. I'm Brid O'Connell, I'm the CEO of Guaranteed Irish, and as you know, Guaranteed Irish has reinvented itself over the last number of years to hold on to all that's good about Ireland and Guaranteed Irish in its olden and heyday, and to bring it, I suppose, kicking and screaming into a modern era and reflect a proper and modern landscape in the business world here in Ireland. Always supported and surrounded by the concept of supporting businesses who create jobs, who support their communities in a sustainable way, and I suppose showcase provenance and contribute to our economy. It's never been more pertinent than it is in the last number of years, supporting businesses in Ireland that are based in Ireland, be they homegrown or multinational, supporting those jobs and communities throughout COVID, and as we face and deal with Brexit, also a huge support there. So very in vogue at the moment, and our job is to make sure that we're supporting our business members out there. As a not-for-profit business, our pure function is to support businesses who create those jobs. So holding on to the old, as I say, but in a very modern setting, reaching out across digital media, etc., to keep that on the radar to support businesses based here in Ireland. Delighted to be a part of this venture in terms of supporting the tech sector, and today we're launching an event called Grow. The webinar is going to be very interesting, and we have amazing speakers. So in terms of running through them, we're delighted to welcome Tracy Keogh, who's the co-founder of Grow Remote. Tracy, you're really welcome. Looking forward to seeing all the work you've done with us in relation to creating businesses that work remotely and helping us, I suppose, get out of that 23% unemployment rate we're facing at the moment and get people back and active. Mark Little leads little or no introduction, CEO and founder of Kinzen, former owner and founder of Storyful, and of course we know him from his RTE days. Mark, we're delighted to have you, and a huge voice in the area of misinformation, disinformation, fake news and good news. So delighted to have you with us today. Ronan Whelan, who's the Chief Commercial Officer with SIRO, delighted to have Ronan with us as well, who's just joined as a member of Guaranteed Irish and big part of the rollout of broadband across Ireland, working with all the digital networks and creating that access for all of us that we're all so desperate in need of. Some parts of rural Ireland are better serviced than Dublin, Ronan, so we'll be talking to you about that, but delighted to have such a big name involved with us and doing such a great job as well. And last but certainly not least, my own fellow director in Guaranteed Irish who represents the tech sector is Damian Mccann, who's the Director of Sales and Marketing with Viatel. Damien has been absolutely fantastic in driving the tech sector in the new Guaranteed Irish. It's a modern sector. When Guaranteed Irish was formed almost 50 years ago, technology and computers and mobile phones didn't exist. So he's really revolutionised in terms of getting people talking in the tech sector, helping us position Ireland as a great destination for tech ventures, be they homegrown or multinational or fused between the two. So from the very outset, please note that there are questions and answers space for all of you to jump on, and we'll come to those at the end of the session, and we'll try and direct those to the people that you'd like them directed the most. The session is also going to be recorded and will be posted out to all of you who have registered for attendance. So without further ado, I'll leave it over to you, Damien, to head off with the discussion, talking about the various different areas where we're going to address in relation to maybe Grow itself, the gender balance, the regional rollout, the opportunities for tech startups, and certainly looking at the worldwide opportunity that exists there for tech businesses coming out of Ireland. Damien.
Yeah, thanks a million, Brid, and I'm delighted to be here today, everyone. Really appreciate the opportunity to, be on the board of directors of Guaranteed Irish and represent the tech sector for the organization, which is doing fantastic work across small tech companies and larger tech companies across the island. So again, to our speakers, thanks a million for joining us, and we'll quickly move into the areas and the topics for conversation this morning. So these are all kind of cutting edge or bleeding edge topics that have been have people scratching their head in the tech sector. The first I'd like to address is in particular, to start off with the gender balance discussion. It could be apt with the sound effects that we've had there. The gender balance topic that we've seen, and from this, Mark, I'd like to bring yourself in from the start. We looked at the Accenture Girls That Code survey. So this was a survey conducted in the US, and it found that in the months of August and September in 2020, an amazing 865,000 women left the workforce. And when we compare that to men, the same number was 216,000. So 865,000 against women against 216,000 men for the same period. The results of the survey found that the global pandemic placed an increased burden on women, juggling their careers, remote learning, caring for children and elderly parents. And I guess the question to start off, Mark, with yourself is, what more can companies do to reverse an imbalance there, particularly in the tech sector?
I can really only speak to you now as obviously an executive, both with an international company and my own startup, and talk about the failures I've had as a male executive in technology. I mean, there is the awareness that I've had for more than 10 years that only diverse teams win. That's the bottom line. Like, if you think that you're box ticking in some way, working on gender diversity or diversity in anything, it's not box ticking. It's fundamental to your business. If you are not getting representation from a gender balance within your company, you are losing as a business, right? That's the first thing. Now, the problem is people have that awareness, like I did about 10 years ago. And then I think what we do as male executives, particularly in technology, and we dominate technology, is we always look for the standard bearer approach, right? We pick a strong woman in our executive team or a company who now has the burden, right, in the company of promoting gender balance. And then you suddenly realize that that person will always be doomed to fail, because this is a structural issue, first of all, as you've just described, right? You know, when we go out looking for machine learning engineers in our company in Kinzen, you know, it's just so happens that that field is dominated by men, right? So it's really hard. And we come up against that structural difficulty. No amount of goodwill can get you to a point. You just got to work harder. And as a society, as you say, women who code, machine learning has got to be a girl thing, right? And our society has to inculcate ourselves. Us as fathers and mothers have to tell our children, you know, my 16-year-old girl, you should be able to code as good, if not better than men, right? So that's a structural issue, but we just have to work hard on that one. The next failure that comes up, I think, is this kind of sort of structural problem within our workforce, where we have 9-to-5 workplaces, right? And that suits men. That suits men wonderfully, right? Because there's an unequal balance of labor within the home. And so, you know, tech workers are always expected to be there at the weekend or work till 7 or 8, or you've got a late night call, as I do this evening with the United States. That suits men, right? Because we don't have, in many ways at home, an equal balance of labor. So again, that has to be addressed. And then the final thing here is the soft, silent sexism, right? And it's very unconscious. And this is one thing that I've done. I've had unconscious bias training within a big platform. It's the best thing ever happened to me. Because you don't realize that men walk into rooms with a certain attitude about them, right? They stand and they talk in a different way and they eat up time, as I'm doing right now, right? And women have a very different way of approaching a team. It's much more collaborative. It's much more curious. It's much more open to other people and ideas that are counter to that. So, you know, it's so many layers of this that I think over my journey, and I've been very lucky because I have a co-founder who's a woman who's taught me so much about the unconscious and the silent things that we've got to change. If there's anything about this lockdown that's been good, I think it's exposed, as we've just heard at the top of this call, us to the realities of us all as human beings at our homes. And it's become much more visible, I think, of the really important hard work that we have to do, particularly the male executives, to stop thinking about things as box ticking or just getting the right standard bearer in your team. It's about everything. It's about your own self-awareness. And so, for example, I talk to women executives, they always tell me about imposter syndrome being something that's very prominent with a woman. Like, am I ready for this? Men don't have that because they're obviously taught from a very early age to feel like they have an entitlement to be there. So it's in that is, I think, the secret of what we talk about with, say, gender balance and broadly diversity of opinion, of voices that don't get heard in society. So again, I speak to you as someone who has failed continually, but in that failure, hopefully as well, I'm learning all the time about the scale of the problem, but also this idea that we should not let another generation pass without fixing the structural problems that we talked about earlier on.
And just on that, Mark, do you feel the needle shifting a little bit? And you're in technology a long time at this stage. Are you seeing progress there? Are you seeing things changing from companies you're dealing with? What's your
What's
impression?
great about it is that the foreign companies that I work at are pushing this back on us, and they're asking us, for example, we build artificial intelligence systems that spot disinformation. How we classify data can a lot of times build gender biases into our algorithms. So a lot of the companies we work are insisting that we think very deeply about the biases that go into our artificial intelligence. So as a company, we are constantly aware, because our business needs to be aware of bias. And that's creating something quite special within our company. So yes, I would like to think that as Indigenous companies, if there's a guaranteed Irish stamp we could put on this, it's that we're the first set of new tech companies to think about the next wave of AI, which is about detecting bias. It's about rooting out the male domination of tech. Why can't we in Ireland be the companies that will be able to go to Silicon Valley and say, we got this? That would be my wish for Irish technology, is to bring in the sort of challenge we have from external sources. And as we do with everything in business, right, we turn a problem into a solution. Let's make this our competitive advantage.
Brilliant, Mark. Yeah, I love that idea of the guaranteed Irish stamp of approval. It's a seal of standards that we're setting. I'd love to bring Tracy in on this. Tracy, so from the survey, again, quoting back to the results we've seen there, 37% of the respondents of that survey cited that company culture was the core reason that they abandoned their career in tech. So it just shows you the huge impact the culture of an organization has on people, and in particular the gender balance within an organization. So I'd like to know from yourself what you see as the key elements company culture must involve to ensure that both men and women thrive equally in an organization.
Yeah, I think, Damien, we were lucky enough to hire a fantastic woman, Joanne Mangan, recently, and she did a master's in gender equality and globalization and internationalization. So the right person to look at this. And one of the first things that she did when she came in to us was look at the future of the workforce and where women will sit within that. And we know that the burden at home is often more so on the woman than the man. And so we're predicting that in the instance where companies are offering a hybrid model, women will choose to work at home. And that we also know that hybrid is more challenging than fully in office or fully remote. And we know that hybrid can develop a two-tier system within an organization where the remote working part are what's known as second-class citizens. They don't have the same access to information, people, resources, and therefore opportunity. So now you're on two back foots. You're pushed way back. And just as Mark was talking about the opportunity for guaranteed Irish and bias, like there's a huge opportunity for a guaranteed Irish stamp of remote first cultures within organizations or brilliant remote companies. People speak about remote companies now as though there's kind of one homogenous group, and that they're not as diverse as the whole spectrum of companies that you can get who ask you to go into an office, and they are as diverse. And we see that the best the best hybrid companies, right? So where some are fully in the office, some are in and out, some are fully remote, have a remote first culture that underpins that. And the piece of remote first culture that is most important is that it's just inclusive of everybody, no matter where they are. It's location agnostic, whether you're in the office or not. And I think because of where we are in Ireland with large remote employers like Shopify, Wayfair, eBay, but then homegrown employers like Actionista, Zite, formerly Scraping Hub, Boundless, Glowfox, Web Summit even went remote. We do have the capability, with the knowledge within Ireland, to build brilliant remote cultures that are inclusive of everybody, no matter where you are, what gender you are, all of that.
Brilliant. So I think we can see the remote culture also intertwining gender equality and other equalities as part of that. In fairness, the topic of gender equality, I think we could dedicate a full session to it, and it's a huge topic that I think we should actually, as a takeaway note from this, is that we need, as a Guaranteed Irish as an organization, is to look and perhaps look at a deeper dive session that we can do around that. But for this morning's session, I'll move it on in terms of the grow topic. And the second letter we have this morning to deal with is the topic of rollout of broadband infrastructure. And over the past 12 months, here I am sitting in lovely sunny Louth Village here this morning in rural Ireland, connected on my my fibre broadband, which comes to the house and have been for the past 12 months. And we've always got that broadband's important for business, but there's a critical reliance that we have on it. The broadband networks have replaced the M1 and the M50 for ourselves in terms of congestion. That's where we're worried about congestion now. It's not at the toll bridges as such. So what I'd like to do is bring Ronan in from SIRO, and me personally, I'm involved with Viatel, and we're deeply involved in connecting businesses across Ireland, and our second business, DigiWeb, connects residential customers across Ireland. But SIRO, I know, are the underlying pipes and infrastructure behind that, and Ronan's deeply involved there. But what I'd ask Ronan is what we can do to accelerate the rollout, Ronan, to ensure that if you're in West Cork, or if you're in Malahide or Dublin, that you have quality connectivity to every home and business across the island.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. Listen, I think it's a really relevant topic. We're all in lockdown. We're all on these Zoom calls now, so the quality of that broadband is critical to us. I think it's worth noting, I joined SIRO in 2015, and to be honest with you, there was no fibre in Ireland at all in terms of to the homes and premises. So there really has been a sea change in terms of what's available out there. So if I could fast forward to today, there's over 1 million premises between AIR, SIRO, and the National Broadband Plan that have access to fibre to the broadband. So that's a hell of a progress. Like 50% of the country can now get fibre broadband, with about 250,000 to 300,000 of them actually connected at the moment. So there's been a dramatic shift in performance over the last 3 years. So if you had to forecast the next 3 or 4 years, you'd say pretty much all of Ireland will be covered by fibre broadband within a 3 to 4 year period. So a pretty significant shift in terms of that. But still, that's no value to the people that can't get it now. Absolutely, if you're sitting in certain locations within Ireland, it's a real challenge. So there's definitively a sense of urgency to get that completed, but also for government to play a role in that. So there's certainly things as Guaranteed Irish can do to try and support that, and I would recommend. I think the first thing is, everyone knows that online trading voucher scheme that's in place at the moment for things that really should be extended to include fibre broadband, so people actually upgrade to those particular spaces as well. Ireland has effectively got this copper infrastructure, so it's been reliant on a telecoms copper infrastructure. We really need to be really extremely ambitious as a country and actually start to move off that completely. So I think the government needs to set a date for when they're going to switch off the copper network, so that it really puts some pace and urgency into the transition to fibre. With that, I spend a lot of time trying to educate people on events like today in terms of the benefits of fibre and why we really need it. I think the government has a role to play there in terms of educating and ensuring that there's an understanding of why people need to upgrade. Otherwise, and I know even from friends, when they go, well, what will I pick, what will I select? I'm on this particular connection, what do I need to get? So we do really need to educate people on why they need particular fibre connections. The final piece is probably the digital divide aspect as well. I think that's really important, and you can certainly see it again from a government perspective. There's certain people within even this digital sort of evolution of fibre and beyond that people can be left behind, and those people are the students, online learning. There's people from disadvantaged areas. In the United States, what they have done, which is really interesting and worth noting, is they give €50 per month to low-income families to support them and actually transition to high-speed fibre. So it's those kind of initiatives that are really important to accelerating not just the rollout of the networks, but the actual people connecting to those networks. So that's where I'd see it, Damien.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ronan. And sticking with that theme of rural Ireland and connecting across the island, Tracy, bringing yourself back in. Last month we seen the government issued the Rural Development Plan, or the Rural Development Policy for 2021 to 2025, which is an ambitious plan. It includes 400 remote working spaces, relocation grants. There was tax incentives included in it, funding for community groups, and what we've seen on paper looked like a strong plan. I guess to yourself, Tracy, is the plan ambitious enough?
Yeah, I think sometimes you have so much controversial opinions here. I think it is. Damien, we through Social Entrepreneurs Ireland and Rethink Ireland were given a model called the theory of change that for me was just mind-blowing. It allowed you to put kind of everything into a set of boxes and go, how do you drive change in society? And there were kind of the groups that need to move, so government, companies, the media, whatever, the influence we would have over that, and then if they change, the impact that would have on the overall impact that we want, which is jobs everywhere, jobs for everybody everywhere, and thriving communities. And what the government have done is, first of all, started a great conversation, and Mark's co-founder Anya hosted a great debate with somebody who was totally anti-remote, but it really kind of got the conversation going and maturing a little bit. So it's done that. It's really good at that hard infrastructure piece. So your broadband, your hubs, and all of that. But if we look at what will drive change, unless you have companies with remote, and I know I'm repetitive, but with remote first cultures who do not penalize you for not being in the headquarters, either consciously or subconsciously, then we won't see sustainable change. So to give you for instance, and Mark mentioned again around kind of systemic problems, and I think for the past while with rural Ireland, we've been very much on the surface and not going for the root of the issue. So there is no Irish company who has co-working stipends, and yet we've 400 hubs. Some companies don't even know whether or not they can work in there. So there's a real mismatch in what's happening in the engine rooms of organizations and what's happening in our communities. And we need to blend the conversation a little bit more. Communities need to understand the commercial element of companies, and companies need to see the return on investment of building out this model. And we're not there yet. So what the government have done is good. What we need to drive change is within Irish organisations. And I think, to be fair to that particular team in DRCD, right after the launch, they were into implementation. I'd say 24 hours. There wasn't a whole lot of flapping about, and even in terms of their engagement with the community, it's regular, it's consistent. So it's really, we need to be looking to Irish companies and asking them to step up a little bit next.
Okay. And the other point I see there that, there's a real opportunity that we've seen with the onset of COVID, right? So almost this policy or this culture of remote working has been forced upon Irish organizations, and we've all embraced it. It's a big thumbs up, I think, across the board. We looked at different organizations conducting surveys, and it seems to be anything that we're hearing out there at the moment is the future of the working environment is going to be a hybrid approach. That also has a knock-on benefit to villages. So, my local village where I'm able to go for a walk or maybe grab a coffee at lunchtime, or in the evening, I can go to the play park and see people. It just creates a buzz around the place that was never here before. So the question to yourself, Tracy, is what can we do to accelerate that rural plan to make sure that we don't miss the COVID opportunity that's presented?
So one of the biggest things that we're doing in Go Remote is working with large Irish and Indigenous companies at CEO level of, say, 2,000 plus employees, and saying, do you want to do it or not? And in terms of, and what we want to see is a proportion of the roles advertised without location within the island of Ireland, because it's not enough to be remote from Dublin a couple of days a week. We who live in the Burren and whatever should have the same access to employment opportunities as everybody else. So I think that we need to get in at CEO level, and we need to support then with identifying the risks and challenges and then working out solutions. So when we speak to senior level executives and organizations, they say, what do I do with the 20 million euro building that I have up in Dublin? And how do I know that this actually won't come back to bite me in terms of people, their mental health, their mental well-being, how connected they feel? What exactly are the risks? And we don't know, because we haven't seen too many transitions of large organizations from in-office to remote. So we really need to be getting the CEOs levels thinking on it, time on it, and then we need a kind of a sandbox to be able to say, okay, does it hurt innovation? Does it hurt collaboration? Can we think of other ways to solve for it? And we definitely can, right? We have had hundreds of years to figure out the office, very small amount of time to figure out remote or hybrid. So I think we need to get them committing to looking at it, and we need to provide a space to running kind of pilot test and learns around how we do remote longer term in a way that works for people, planet and profit.
Fantastic. So in summary, and I want to get this right, that the government's kind of doing their part from a from a planning perspective, but now it's the time for private enterprise almost to step up to the plate to a certain extent.
Exactly. Yeah,
okay.
That's it. That's great.
Okay, so from opportunity perspective, Mark, I'd like to bring yourself back in terms of opportunities that we look at for the tech startups in Ireland. And we know you very well in terms of your roles, and you've been at both sides of the organizations in terms of you've led the global tech giant, being Twitter, from a European perspective, but then you've been right back at the seed level, the grassroots, with Storyful, as you grew it out, and now Kinzen. And I'm interested to hear from your own experience. Do you think Ireland's created a better environment for the startups to thrive on the same level maybe as the FDI giants? Where do you think, who has the better deal?
No, that's the answer. The bottom line is that it's very, very easy to start a company in Ireland, and it is to the credit of Enterprise Ireland and government supports like R&D tax refunds to begin a company, to set out on your journey, and then you hit this brick wall. You hit this brick wall where you're like about to go for the next level, and suddenly you look around you and there's no one else there with you. And so I think what the core of this is not just about government policy, it's about the idea that like startups are like basically in a very fertile field in places like Israel or in places like Sweden, where you start a company and there's lots of things around you in the ecosystem to help you, and there's lots of venture capital for the scale period, and there's people around you just like you a little bit further, so you can see the scouts setting out. And we don't have that. We have these kind of isolated people who are wonderful, but who kind of feel very lonely. And it's just a really big missed opportunity, because we have a chance right now to do a couple of things as a country to really put ourselves on a different level. We have like a reset moment globally. So we're entering into what I would call a never normal, where the sort of mark of a country that is ready for this is a country that's willing and able and actually embraces the idea that the only constant is going to be change, right? And the thing that people are looking for in the world today is trust and quality. We've entered a period now where in everything we do, from the way, just like we heard about broadband, to processing credit card payments, to the information we consume, that's where Ireland's competitive advantage, I think, is. So let's take some of the things we're strong at the moment as a nation. So I think we're very strong at FDI, as you say. Corporate tax will not last as an incentive for companies coming to Ireland. And right now, I have to tell you, the dirty secret is a lot of those companies are here for tax rates. So if we think that we don't have to make some sort of value transition and we could just rely on that corporate taxation rate for the future, we are fooling ourselves. So what we have to be doing is looking for ways to look at the talent that has been incubated in those big companies, and I'm constantly poaching and hiring them into my little startup, and thinking about things like Stephen Kinsella at the University of Limerick is launching an immersive product development program, which is really wonderful, because he's actually using the Stripes of the world, the great Limerick-born duo have to go to California to start their big company, but they're bringing back some of that know-how. So finding ways to kind of use the FDI companies as a launch pad for talented individuals that at some point after 3 or 4 years go, I've learned enough in the Google of the world, I'm going to start my own thing. Right now, Ireland is not a place they can say, I've got all the skills that I need around me to make this a big thing. And that's what we've got to look at. We've got a bit of a time period now to use the skills that we've developed with these companies to move them into high value, high specialist areas, like in my case, trust and safety, content moderation, making Ireland a destination for that, which is a very high value activity in tech companies. We could, and we are trying to do this with Kinzen, make Ireland the hub for that. But there are other areas that speak to our competitive advantage around quality, purity, green, creativity, the sense of being the trusted mediator in the middle. These are all things that people associate Irish people with. That could translate into a revolution in things like fintech, medtech, agtech, Infotech is what we call this new sector around information quality. But also, I think we should be thinking about a hyper-local level, because I'm going to ask everyone to be a little bit science fiction in their minds, right? If I told you about 15 years ago that a company called Facebook would dominate the world, you'd laugh at me. We're going to have to get used to the idea that there are certain things coming down the track that will help decentralize businesses, like, for example, blockchain, where you could actually create local assets around things like food or renewable energy, or even creative projects and tourism projects, allowing a small community in Ireland to define the value of something like its local produce. And this is already happening in places like France, around wine, in New Zealand, around honey. Why couldn't it be that we might use some of these revolutionary technologies that are decentralizing powers to communities to start really creating these new digital assets? So I do think it's not all about building the new Stripes of the world or getting my company to an international stage. It may be about having a sort of a revolution of 10,000 new businesses in Ireland that can own a digital asset like wind power or solar energy in a community and turning that into a community asset. So I think that's an area that we should be looking at very quickly, because as I say, this new normal is not a return to some equilibrium. It's a never normal. It's a movement to a whole new era in human development that is going to be marked, I think, by decentralization and trust. And we're ready for that, as long as we sort of get out of this mentality that we're looking for 3 or 4 big unicorns. That gets us nowhere.
Yeah, yeah. So it's almost an unhealthy obsession with the unicorns as such, whereas we need to look to our communities and local.
Indigenous, it's all about this idea that, like, we can have people work for a big company for a while, but we want them to stay here and start something themselves. And it's easy to do that. And as I say, I'm giving credit to EI, who backed me all the way and helped me, and I couldn't have done it without them. But at some point, you're very alone. And then you go over and look at your colleagues from Tel Aviv or from Stockholm, and they're like factories churning out these people who are just hungry for something to make it on the world stage.
Yeah, the second point you made there, Mark, I think there is certainly something in it in terms of, we look at the FDI space in Ireland that's, training people to the highest standards in sales, operations, technology functions, and that talent, after a few years, if Irish companies, if Indigenous Irish companies can tap into that ecosystem and almost draw down that talent, 1 or 2 people from those organizations can change, revolutionize your business and your mindset.
Yeah, and I think let's look forward as well to the way that machine learning and artificial intelligence is going to impact everybody. If you think of a business right now that's immune to the effects of AI, you're fooling yourself. And what's going to be happening more and more is that the vast volume of tasks in businesses will now be taken care of more by machines. So we're going to see real premium around the high value human skills around things like risk and compliance, and as I say, trust and safety. And that's, I think, where we can really move quickly to say we're not going to be places, and with all due respect to the sales and marketing operations, I'm thinking more now of the people where humanity is essential to make the machine work better. And I think that is a fundamental thing we should keep, because that's where I think we're turning out people right now in Ireland that have such a power globally. Even my own former organization, Twitter, I look at my sort of successor, Sinead McSween, and the people she works with in Twitter in Dublin. They're playing such an outsized role internationally because they have such an important and high value role within the organization. And that, I think, is an example that we should be looking at ways to grow innovation off that very fertile small field that was set up in Dublin a couple of years ago.
And just sticking with that theme, Mark, and a lot of the great work you guys in Kinzen are doing, like, we're living in a period, it's just information overload from we get up in the morning till we go to bed at night. We see the truth according to what our iPhone tells us, our news feeds, differentiation between the truth, the lies, the conspiracy theories, and there's often a blurred line between these, what's fake news, what's real news. And then we're actually seeing real world consequences out there, knock-on impacts in terms of government decisions, protests on the street, whatever it is. We see that playing out in real world. So often what we've seen is media streams have been controlled by detailed algorithms which manage the truth that we see on a daily basis. And even the algorithms, as you know, can contain algorithm bias. You know, whoever wrote the algorithm can almost program their algorithms with a bias to their conditional thoughts. So question for yourself is, have we reached the point where human judgment or more human judgment is required than AI at this stage? And the parallel I'll just draw very quickly for you from our sector in the security element of our business. We've seen for years it was AI, machine learning, firewalls were picking up security threats on a daily basis, but it's actually reached a level that more human eyes are needed now than ever before, and human security experts are needed 24/7 to work alongside the AI. So it's almost a hybrid approach of intelligence needed. You know, we're moving back to human intelligence a little bit. So interested to see that from your perspective and what you're seeing there.
Yeah, I compare this. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Big Short. It's about 2008 and the collapse of the financial system. We're a bit like that with information and algorithms, where, you know, all these people wrote these algorithms, they don't know how they work anymore. I'll be honest, there's no way that anyone in the big platforms understands what the thing they've built is just out of control. So we're going through a period of collapse of our information systems, a bit like the collapse of the financial system in 2008 and 9. Now, out of that is a whole fertile area for creativity to build back up the trust level. So as you say, what we do at Kinzen, we call ourselves an information risk company, a bit like, you know, protecting companies and protecting platforms from the risk of disinformation. So there's an opportunity now, as you say, you know, for whole new sectors. With the collapse of the old system that was run by faceless algorithms, there's a whole new industry that would be built up around a phrase called human in the loop. Now, that's a machine learning term for when you have a human putting data in, very specialist data, not big loads of data, but like quality data, high refined, purified data, which builds a better quality machine, which makes a high quality recommendation to a human being that can make a decision. It's used in diagnostics and medical technology. It's now being used a lot in information. That's a massive area. So just remember, human in the loop. And finally, this is not just about big algorithms, big companies. We're going to have to see a revival of public interest media at local level. The biggest danger we have in the United States is the collapse of local journalism and local media. I would love to see us in Ireland, and I'm on a media commission at the moment looking at this idea about how we rejuvenate the concept of communities that have information, quality information, shared among each other. So we don't have a lot of attention to what happens in our civic institutions, our courts, you know, what the local economy's like, where can you get the right remote working space? And, you know, there's really got to be a revival of a sense of community. And whoever, you know, managed to make this hyper local media work, trusted media, is going to have a model that will export itself. I'm watching examples like in the United States, Nextdoor is a big new social network. We will see the collapse of the fragmentation of big platforms like Facebook and those ones, and we will see the rise of hyper-local, hyper-niche information platforms. And that for me is where I get hope, is A, solving information risk, and B, reviving local media so that we talk to each other in a very communal way and a very trusted way, and we build technology that also allows that to happen. So again, I would say this is big picture, but also very hyper-local.
Brilliant, Mark. Thanks for that. Bringing in Tracy. Tracy, from your side of things, you know, I know you're the, this is the title I will put upon you, the ambassador for remote hubs. You're creating employment or helping create employment in local towns and villages across Ireland. And I'm interested to know, Tracy, do you think you're actually pushing an open door with these facilities that were in previously overlooked area? And are they fully utilized and embraced by locals? Or are these hubs that are in villages going to go back to being bingo halls and cake sales? What's your thoughts on that, Tracy?
So when we started off with co-working space managers, and the occupancy rates that we were often dealing with was around 25%. And because these are usually non-profit entities, you need them to be at about 60% to break even. So there was a big gap there. One kind of pivotal moment for me was being at the commuter zones beside a hub and being like, you don't have to commute anymore, we've got a hub here. And a couple of things came back. One is, I like the commute, don't have to make breakfast, don't have to clean up, don't have to cook dinner, it's fine, it's good for me. So they go on the commute. Second thing that came back was, I'm hardly commuting at 6 o'clock in the morning because I have the option. you know, I will either be, you know, penalised formally, or I won't have career progression opportunities if I'm not going into the office every day. And that's where we realised actually the challenge of the issue again is with companies and the culture within there and how they advertise jobs. And then when you get into hubs as they are now, we started off with a stat from Blueface that there are 217,000 remote workers in Ireland, and we thought, great, kind of like start a community, we'll just bring them for pints every month and kind of get local communities going, and then through that we'll fill the co-working spaces. And then we realised that there weren't that number of remote workers in Ireland, because it depends what you classify as a remote worker. And then we got into, okay, there are 55,000 remote jobs open in Ireland today. And if you survey the 10 people around any hub in Ireland, they will not know about GitLab, Automatic, any of these companies who will employ them there. So we realised we had to go back a little bit. Awareness, skills training, and so we've got free national skills training, we've got awareness programs. So a bit like kind of what Mark said there, we were very lucky to get Google advertising, 10 grand every month for Google non-for-profits. And how we promote the jobs is find jobs Clonakilty, and then we upload the remote jobs, because people are still searching by their location for jobs, but the jobs are being advertised irrespective of location. So we try and sit in and match that. And that's where we have 230 local communities across 17 countries fostering local ecosystems for remote workers. And I think, so to go back to your point, hubs are great, hubs are fantastic. And a bit like how, I guess, I always love the story of Chuck Feeney in UL and how he focused on buildings. I think there's something great about having a physical asset there where you can see how it's going. And we could see that they weren't occupied, and we need to do something else. So I think it's go to the root of the issue in Irish corporates, and then around these hubs, educate people around the awareness about where these jobs are, and make sure they've got the skills to get them. And then they get to sit in a hub. That's where we are on it.
Thanks, Tracy. And just looking at the hubs, and you know, personally, I'm involved with a local hub here that we drew down funding for and redeveloped our community centre into a small business hub. You know, with limited success, and it's, you know, it falls back to the volunteers, you know, to make these things work. They're certainly not a business model that works off its own footing, you know. And with that, you know, you've, for instance, bringing Ronan in here, communication costs. You know, we need world-class fiber optic telecoms into these places to compete on a global scale. You know, so Ronan, from your side of things, how can the likes of SIRO help? And I think you guys were involved with the Ludgate hub as well. Interested to know how the telecoms companies can help here.
Yeah, listen, I think we have a pivotal role to play. SIRO itself, we have done probably about 15 gigabit hubs, so we supply them at no charge to try and foster that sort of environment. I think the government's plan is to have about 400 hubs around the country to support that type of thing. So for me, the communications companies, listen, there's far better brains for us in developing companies. Mark and Tracy are explaining it there. But certainly what a communications company can do is really provide the platform, the foundations that they actually can access these new technologies. And I think Mark spoke very eloquently about AI and VR and that kind of stuff, virtual reality worlds. Those hubs become so important for that sense of community that Mark spoke about there, but for fostering that kind of collaboration within it, so that you're actually in a hub that potentially is sort of, because it can be a very lonely world working some of those smaller companies. So to have a hub that you can actually get into and have other people that are in those environments, our job is really to try and provide those environments that people can actually, we bring those people in. I think we have a job to play as well in sort of promoting the use of those, no different than what Tracy has referenced there. And certainly Tracy's a better expert than I am. But there's so much ecosystem that sits around that fiber infrastructure. But the value of the fiber infrastructure, once it's in place, is it's so scalable. That's the advantage. 1 gig, 10 gig, 100 gigs. So the speed is there. So that's our job, and certainly we're, you know, as SIRO, we're really keen to support those hub environments.
Great to see, and great to hear. You know, you guys get involved. I think you mentioned 15, where you guys are providing the service without charge. So that, you know, that really helps the local ecosystem in terms of thrive, because as I mentioned, the economics don't always add up. You know, is there almost a social responsibility on the big tech companies to get involved here and provide services at a lower cost, or even in exchange for sponsorship or PR or something like that? Is that something, Tracy, you're seeing at the edge?
So I think this is an interesting one. So we're a social enterprise, right? We're a registered CLG and non-profit. And one of the things that was like bet into us was trading income, right? Finding a way to make money. And to become sustainable. And when we got the funding from Regional Enterprise Development Fund from Enterprise Ireland, one of the key criteria was becoming sustainable ourselves. And I think that needs to hold true for the hubs. I think that if they're not, that we can subsidise, we can support, definitely to get them set up, right? On any support you can get, even if it's sometimes just a bit of encouragement, is great. But longer term, it needs to work commercially. So that's kind of our viewpoint on it. And for that, they need to get, I know I'm repeating myself, you need to get into the companies, show them the ROI, say, right, embed co-working stipends as part of your model. Here's how it works for you. And then you have the likes of the National Association of Enterprise Centres and Western Development Commission, UDROS, everybody working together to have one procurement system and one booking system, because there are already 400 hubs in Ireland. So no, like obviously give money wherever you can to whatever you can. That's kind of people doing good stuff. But as a movement, we need to stand on our own 2 feet. It's also just more fun when you're not kind of having to beg people for money all the time.
Yeah, and
Damien,
I get that. Yeah, go ahead, Mark. Come in.
Just one thing I learned from the States, particularly in journalism, where non-profit journalism is now a growing area. But one non-profit journalist outfit said to me recently, they said non-profit is a tax status, not an aspiration, right? So like it's literally just protection to build a social enterprise the way Tracy's talking about, but sustainability is the key. And I think social enterprise could be one of Ireland's competitive advantages, getting a model where essentially something like media, you don't have to start up a VC founded company, right? VC funding is not the only way to build a company. And I think social enterprise should be a model that's held out as a starting point, not a place you go after you've made some money, you want to give it away for charity. It's not charity. Non-profit is a tax status, not a destination. And I think that's one thing we should learn from other places and perhaps make it our own.
Yeah, very good, Mark. Go ahead, Tracy.
Sorry, that's just on social enterprises themselves, right? You look at Coder Dojo, Food Cloud, Men's Sheds, like so many examples of like brilliant things that were started here and scaled abroad, and other people not only use that particular model abroad, they use that model to build their own ideas. ChangeX being a prime example is something that's just phenomenal. Social enterprise is treated a lot differently in Ireland. So whereas if you're a for-profit entity, you're encouraged to go abroad, Ireland is too small, blah blah blah. When you're not for profit, it's you need to be just focused in on Ireland. For us, like we can't. We need to be as distributed as companies that we work with. We need to go abroad. There is no program to help do that. When Irish organisations like Rethink or SEI, who are phenomenal, amazing, I love them. When they talk about scaling, they're talking about scaling within Ireland. They're not talking about scaling abroad. So if you have that ambition to go, which we really should, because they're going anyway. Like, you know, as I said, there's great examples. There is no current place for that. So there's definitely something around Guaranteed Irish and social enterprise that's done really well.
So Tracy, is that something almost aligned to, you know, your Enterprise Ireland for social entrepreneurs going global, you know, to that almost, yeah, is that something you could see?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset around like, so basically Rethink and SEI are somewhat funded by government funding, and so and look, for REDF, like it's taxpayers' money, so you do want to have the impact locally, but not unlike a for-profit company. If you're not reaching, if you're not building, if you're not growing, you actually won't have the impact locally either. So sometimes I think it's a mindset around just what we expect from, like when we say for profit, we have certain connotations which are sometimes mostly around charity, and you know, like for us, our income is the government income is only say 1/3 of what we're earning now, so it's not the biggest portion. So let us go and build, and actually encourage us to build, and we're encouraged not to build, we're encouraged to stay in Ireland. So yeah, I think the entities who support social entrepreneurs and social enterprises in Ireland are fantastic, but it's about they're delivering what their funders ask for. So it's about maybe a mindset shift.
And I think that's, we see that again and again in nonprofits, is there's no structures, that we're not investing in infrastructure. That's why Change X, which Paula Hara created maybe 10 years ago, is so amazing, because it's platform. It gives people tools rather than just say, here's another bit of money, and then you got to compete again for that money next year and the year after. And your whole short-termism that comes about chasing grants kills you in the end. Whereas if we invested in platform, like a platform that allows men's sheds, gives them the tools to do their work, money, smart money, that's what we need, not just another 50 grand fund thrown in every year to keep you alive. I think that's a key.
Yeah. So it's almost like the grants become the drug for the organization, you know, the next grant application, that they're living from grant application to grant application. So we have to move away from that model to a more sustainable model. Right. So good points there. Thanks, guys, for coming in on that. The final piece I'd like to discuss.
Damien,
yeah, go ahead, Brid. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, very briefly, I'm really delighted that came up. We're not for profit Guaranteed Irish, and not a penny or a dime from the government, which people for some reason think that is there. It was back in the 70s, but not anymore. So it has become a complete sustainable model, and we made a real conscious decision with a really dynamic board of directors, who are all voluntary, by the way, including Damien, that we wouldn't go down the route of the old heroin shot in the arm. That we were going to raise our own money through a sustainable platform, which is license membership, etc. And all for that became the whole media, the PR piece and all that. So that for us was really strong. One of the other points I really want to make, and I won't ruin it for the summary, but just the whole idea of this moving away from the globalization, I really see it, and we've never seen it more strongly than in the last 2 years. And it was really there before COVID. So when you think about globalization of food production, had moved back to the farmer's market and the local food producer. The globalization of the drinks industry, the likes of the Guinnesses, the Diageo, etc. There's a big shift to craft brewers and local distilleries, etc. And we've seen it in so many sectors. Intel themselves were one of our leaders, I suppose, in IDA and tech in the hardware side of things for Ireland, have given so much rhythm to support to small fledgling companies that are coming out of it, and they pride themselves on doing that. And I really see the opportunity there for those small tech companies that Mark alluded to, having this DNA that's being produced using the experience of the large multinationals, but breeding a bit like what we did with aviation leasing through GPA and Shannon. And now look at this, the type of business that we have in aviation leasing coming out of Ireland, really world class and world leaders. So we need to try and do the same in the tech sector. Guaranteed Irish is all over being part of that, and would love to see that indigenous, homegrown, but using that global perspective, and not afraid of it. And one of the big exciting parts for us, and we only spoke about it yesterday, Damien, at Guaranteed Irish board level, is that a lot of our members over half of our members are exporting, and the G is starting to travel now. And I think there's an opportunity right now for the tech sector in Ireland to be part of this. Guaranteed Irish, the national symbol of trust, to be part of this trusted space that we're exporting. So it's knowledge going abroad, but also knowledge coming, people having trust in coming into Ireland in that tech space and using it. So there's certainly an opportunity here for fusion. And we want to back that and be part of that conversation, be part of the driving force with that in a sustainable model that will affect both every business across the world, not just Irish businesses, but companies who are going to source jobs here, be it wherever it is, throughout Ireland, which will tick your box, Tracy. But I just think there's so much opportunity here. I just had to jump in there. Too excited. But I think there's opportunities, and let's just see where we can bring this. I think there's another few steps in it.
Yeah, and I'd like to tease that out. That theme of Guaranteed Irish Global, and we're living with this discussion at board level of Guaranteed Irish. We've conducted some research. Everything points towards, it's almost like the shackles need to come off some Irish enterprise, and they're looking for global opportunities, and they're looking for an organization that they can linchpin onto and say, yeah, I'm part of this, and this is my badge of honor as I go global. So what do you guys think the opportunity is there? So, Mark, what do you think the opportunity is for the Guaranteed Irish organization and our companies, our ecosystem there to connect on a global level?
We've got to be very careful that we don't fall into a mindset that we used to have, right? That you get off the plane in New York at Kennedy and you go straight to the Irish bar or the Irish American reception, or you look for the people with Murphy in their name, and then you get in, you talk to them, and you go, the old sod's still alive. Come on, give us a bit of money. And like literally, I would see that when I was in Washington as a Washington correspondent. I would get so jaded. I was like, this is not on my Ireland. You're not selling my Ireland. You're not selling the Ireland of young people who are starting companies, who are setting out to be global. And so what I look at when I think about the diaspora, I look at looking for the scouts and translators from our tribe that have gone either to Silicon Valley or they're in Shenzhen, people like Liam Casey, everyone knows Mr. China, or people who are now in Nigeria and watching a new economy explode, or people who are thinking about the new fundamental challenges of artificial intelligence. I want them. I want to find those people who have already made it and connect with them and let them be our translators and our guides to a new world. Even thinking about today, the very first question out of the gate was gender and diversity. I mean, that's exactly the kind of start we need to make, because this new world in different languages, I want to get in the mindset of an entrepreneur in Malaysia who's starting out the next big platform is going to dominate e-commerce. I don't want to go back and get the Murphys, and with all due respect to them, I want those people who are out there in the field. And that's where we need to look at our diaspora as almost being like that scouting party out there, looking for the opportunities and then helping us translate ourselves into the concerns of a new 18-year-old who's just got their iPhone for the first time and has suddenly got money in their pocket and wants to spend it. And therefore we have to think about a mindset. Is this diaspora is a way for us to connect with a new world, not rely upon our importance with an old world. And therefore the diaspora will still be as important, finding those people that are Irish and that are scouting a path. But I think that requires us to be a little less, reverting back to type and looking at Patrick's Day and government ministers getting on planes. I mean, that's great and that has its place. It's not going to help us in the never normal.
Yeah, I think, Damien, just to add to that, I think Guaranteed Irish has a great role to play. And I think, and what Mark said about the diaspora, there's a mentoring scheme type environment where we can create an access point for those companies that are based in Ireland to access these people, but try and get structure on. The challenge is always trying to make these connections and trying to find out who's who in the zoo. So if Guaranteed Irish can create within each sectors those people that are potentially powerful to access and that are interested in doing those particular roles, and then trying to find that particular avenue. So try and create that sort of connected world. I think that would be a great opportunity.
Thanks, Ronan.
I meant to finish off by saying, I'm sorry, I don't mean we should move away from our old competitive advantages, by the way. I think that, for example, tourism, food, these are sectors that we can repackage and resell. And I think, my brother's in the tourism business, shout out to the Lakeside Hotel. And they, basically he's out there selling all the time to new markets. So I didn't mean in any way to say we should move away from traditional competitive advantage Ireland have. If anything, the need for purity and greenness and quality is ever more saleable in the world today. We just have to put our direction slightly differently.
No, great points, Mark. Tracy, literally in 20 seconds, have you got a lasting point for us?
So for us, right now, if the senior leadership go back into the main offices, and I'm just looking at Bank of Ireland just announced a flexible working policy, they're going to get rid of the building on Mespil Road. If we don't get senior leaders to commit to what the future of their workplace looks like, so it's not like a magnet coming back with everybody coming back into the office, we're going to miss the opportunity, which is what we're hearing is happening in both China and New Zealand. So there's a small window of opportunity with which to embed pretty significant systemic change, and we need all hands on deck to achieve it.
Brilliant.
That's it.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah.
Ronan, thank you so much. Mark, thanks a million. Genuinely really appreciate you guys taking time out and joining us this morning. I'm going to hand over to Brid for the final wrap. Brid, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to have to do this in about 2 minutes. A couple of questions I have to ask. One strong takeaway from this session for me is the anticipating change will be a big positive differentiator for Irish businesses in the opportunity time in the years ahead. In a nutshell, what do the panel think Irish business leaders should do to develop the capability to anticipate change? Maybe really fast, Mark?
There's a great exercise I do called pre-mortem, work out, go 5 years ahead, and why would your business fail? What are the factors that would force you down the tubes? That's a great way of doing it. So develop new mindsets as a business leader, thinking ahead of what the big factors you're not thinking about today and should be thinking about. That's something I've learned that's very helpful.
Okay, one strong, okay, I have put that in. What's the average capacity of a hub, Tracy? 10 to 20 people. A target of 400 hubs means 4,000 to 8,000 people. That's a drop in the ocean if there are 50,000 remote working jobs available, plus all the people who are now working from home. Hubs are a distraction from the core challenge of bringing high-speed internet across to every home, be it fibre or 5G or satellite. Colin Flynn, same person. Oh yeah, okay. Doesn't really like hubs, he's telling us. So what do you do with that, Tracy?
What do I do with that? Each their own. I suppose a grow motor about choice, right? Once you've all the information to be able to make a decision that's good for you, go for it. Like if you don't like hubs, don't work in hubs. Equally, there's some companies, remote working doesn't always mean hubs. Shopify only work from home, eBay only work from home. There's different models for different organizations. So I do think though that hubs play a pivotal role in bringing activity back to the main street, and that can't be underestimated. The health of the main street affects the health of the surrounding community.
Absolutely, and I'm wondering if the goal is only to open towards remote work within Ireland or also from outside of Ireland. But I think you've answered that already. It's also for outside of Ireland, Tracy.
And Brid, just on the fibre, the fibre will be there with it. So the 50% of the country is done, and I read the other 50% will be done within 3 or 4 years. So I think the point is valid too, that fibre has to be all over the country as well.
Absolutely, and that's a couple of the questions there as well. On the roundup from the questions and the roundup from the speakers this morning, the big thing I think that I've taken away from it and would have huge interest in nurturing and following this through from a Guaranteed Irish perspective is the whole idea of an opportunity for Guaranteed Irish to get behind tech companies and businesses in general to look at the whole idea of dealing with the bias and the gender bias, and let's make companies from now on not part of that, so to change or to disrupt that DNA piece. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to do that. I don't know how we do it. I love what you say on it, Mark. Really interesting. I'm welcoming it for sure. But I think there's an awful lot of work to do. It's not something that can happen overnight, but it's a bit like what you're saying. Look at it 5 years from now. Do we really want to be at this still? Do we still want to be having the same conversations? It needs to change yesterday. So it's a brilliant concept, and how do we make that, and how do we make that a seal of approval? And likewise, the whole opportunity for that grow remote culture, I love it. I think it'll really present opportunities, and that will help the gender bias in lots of ways. But it'll also help the bias against rural communities that are there, and it takes away the pressure and all the points that we know that are negative with the city, and stop a city from thriving, and allow a community to thrive and regrow. I'm really looking forward to us getting more involved in driving the tech sector and getting in behind those companies. Remember, as the national symbol of trust, we're there to help. We're there to support businesses. We're not in it for the money. We're not making a profit, but it's critical we don't make a loss. And it's critical that the companies who are out there in the remote areas and the hubs aren't either. And if we're really serious about driving the tech sector as something that differentiates Ireland and it's the Irish brand, we need to make sure that we're allowing that fusion of the best learnings from the big multinationals coming in here, using that and breeding new tech startups. And I think we're going to be all together better for doing that. And I think that's a good note for us to finish up on. Can I thank a CEO of Guaranteed Irish, the time given by Mark Little, Damian Mccann, Ronan Whelan and Tracy Keogh. You've been fantastic, and I'm sure there'll be loads of follow-up from that. If people want to reach out to you, maybe you just give us a contact there that they'd like to make contact with you on. Mark?
I'm on Twitter at Mark Little News. Kind of where I spend most of my life.
Of course. And Ronan?
Ronan.Whelan at SIRO.ie. Email best for me.
Tracy?
Yeah, hello, growremote.ie. Any questions you have about remote work, fire them there and we'll answer them.
So our next event, each month, as you know, in Guaranteed Irish, we celebrate a particular sector. Next month is May. We celebrate the professional services, and we look forward to you joining us on our forum on the 27th of May at 9:30 a.m. Many thanks, and thank you for your time.